It is 8 p.m. in East Africa and 7 p.m. in Cairo. This is Africa Live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Penina Karibe in Nairobi. Plenty coming up, including the following stories. Boosting China-Africa trade, we speak to Tony Alumelu, one of Africa's richest men and CEO of Air Holdings, and developing private sector partnerships.
The fact that he became one of the best players of the team in Scotland proves that he is worthwhile, that he worked hard, that he has a good mentality. And I think Kenya has to be proud of these kind of players because that will bring up the Kenyan football in general.
And East Africa celebrates Victor Wanyama's English Premier League contract. We begin in Egypt. It has been another day of continued protest there, with both supporters of ousted President Mohamed Morsi and his opponents turning out in their numbers to express their standpoints. And our correspondent in Cairo, Adel Mahroui, has been closely following the developments in that North African country. He joins us live from Cairo. Adel.
Well, the people from both sides supporting Morsi or anti-Morsi are now relieved because the sun has set, and that means that they can restart eating and drinking after a very long, harsh day. It was very hot today, but both sides try to maintain their protests in the streets despite these harsh conditions. Right now the numbers are actually increasing both ways at Rabah Al Adawiya Square in Cairo University, where President Morsi supporters are based, and here in Tahrir Square in the presidential palace, where anti-Morsi protests are being held. So with the sunset, not only a physical relief, but also the numbers of protesters supporting either side is increasing as well.
Indeed, Adele. Now, we'll be getting back to you in a short while, but just like Adele said, rallies have continued 10 days after the oust of Egyptian President Morsi. Tens of thousands of people are continuing to show support either for Morsi's reinstatement or his removal, and this as they still continue with the Ramadan fasting. Take a look.
Under Egypt's burning sun and an average temperature of 40 degrees Celsius, citizens continued their protests. With most people fasting in Ramadan, rallying in this heat without food or drink became a battle of perseverance. Liberal powers called their supporters for a protest in Tahrir, from the Friday prayers at noon to an iftar meal at sunset. But the numbers in the square were weak.
There are few people because of the heat and the fasting. Later in the evening, we expect many more people. In Tahrir, each person comes alone, and like the Brotherhood who rent buses and give allowances for their supporters to stay.
On the other hand, Muslim Brotherhood supporters were more tolerant to the harsh fasting conditions in the street.
The scene that you see here is the greatest indication on how keen these people are to get back their rights. They're sustaining this immense heat to reject the military coup. There should be no weapons in politics. We reject that.
They protested on the first Friday in Ramadan, and they're planning to continue until Morsi returns. While their former ally, the Salafi Noor party, is leading talks to include the Brotherhood in Egypt's new transition. To reach that, it hopes to give Morsi a right to run through the next election if the Brotherhood will hold on to him through the next race. Egyptians who ousted President Morsi were not very keen to take the streets during the daytime. But Morsi's supporters, however, exerted more effort by protesting 24/7, sending a message that even fasting in Ramadan will not stop them. Adel Mahroui, CCTV, Cairo.
Adele still standing by for us live in Cairo. Let's go back to him. Adele, so far the rallies have been peaceful. So is this perhaps an indication that people can express their differences without causing further divisions in the country?
Well, I want to let you know that when we talk to both sides, from President Morsi supporters and his opponents, both are very keen to have peaceful protests in the country. They both know that the country cannot afford any more violence in the streets, and both of them confirm that they're not willing to get engaged in it. However, there is still a polarization. Both sides are still insisting on their position. The Brotherhood is now taking a similar position to the liberal parties when President Morsi was in power. They are boycotting the dialogue. They're rejecting to deal with any form of a backed interim president or a backed interim prime minister from the army. They stand against what Marshal al-Sisi, the defense minister, has made, or the change that he has led the country to, and they believe that it is a coup. While the others still believe that this was a popular demand and still insist that the Brotherhood should be involved in the interim period for Egypt, the transition through the next year. But so far, it doesn't seem that any of them will change his mind.
I mean, Adel, you just say that the country right now is deeply polarized. And my question to you is, how can the new government keep this country together despite the huge differences we're seeing?
Well, the government itself will not have any leverage or any power to ease this polarization. It is only the interim president with the army and the political powers, these together alone, together they should reach a consensus on any form of transition. There are some suggestions on the ground that there might be a possibility. Why not make a referendum or take a vote from the people asking if they want early presidential elections or not? This might fuel down the tension from the Brotherhood sides and their supporters. But of course it's too late for that, because now mainly there is a new president on the ground in the palace. President Morsi is under siege, or he is detained. The whereabouts about his location has not been announced. Not even his family is speaking. Where is he going? There has been some information that he's only allowed 3 calls a day to his sons mainly. So these all things need to be transparent. The army need to be transparent about it and to give a sense of confidence to the pro-Morsi supporters that there is a serious intention for them to be included in the transition.
All right, Adel, thanks very much for joining us. That's Adel Mahroui live in Cairo. Let's now focus on Nelson Mandela's health. Now, his wife, Graça Machel, left her husband's side on Friday to be fingerprinted in Johannesburg for a new smart identity card that will be launched during the former president's birthday next week. Graça has been keeping a low profile, spending most of her time near Mandela, who is admitted at the Mediclinic Heart Hospital in Pretoria. After officials collected her biometric details, including her photograph and electronic signature, Machel said she was relieved that Mandela was responding positively to treatment, adding that he may even be well enough to register for his own smart ID card.
So I'm happy to have been one of those senior citizens who are in the first line to set the example. And I thank you all for really making it easy for me to perform this duty. Because it is also a time where everybody wants to know, how is Madiba doing? He continues to respond positively to treatment. I would say that today I'm less anxious than I was a week ago. And definitely he will also have his own chance of participating in this process. We will make it easier as possible for him also to be standing and be counted as a fully citizen of this nation.
Meanwhile, Thursday marked the 50th anniversary of the infamous raid on Liliesleaf Farm in Johannesburg, South Africa, where a number of people were arrested in 1963. The raid changed the course of the struggle against apartheid, as well as the country's history. Nelson Mandela, who was already in jail during the crackdown, was linked to the subversive activities through documents found at the scene.
On the 11th of July 1963, police from South Africa's apartheid regime swooped on the Rivonia farm in Johannesburg, where political activists had gone underground planning to topple the racist government. The event led to the arrest of Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, Ahmed Kathranda, and Andrew Mlangeni, among others. The raid led to the Rivonia trial after the struggle leaders were charged with treason. The set is called the Liliesfield Farm Memory and Legacy Set. The events of 1963 were portrayed through a live reenactment which took place at the exact time a group of policemen jumped out of a fake dry cleaning van to storm the farm.
This place, Lily's Farm, And our arrest in 1963, I think it was a big occasion. An occasion which I believe expedited our democracy. Because if we were not arrested, I don't think we would be where we are today.
I feel wonderful. 50 years ago we were arrested, and now I live in free South Africa, and I'm part of that, and I share the democracy, and it's wonderful.
Former South African President Nelson Mandela, who was also honored on Thursday, remains in a critical but stable condition and is responding to treatment, according to South African President Jacob Zuma.
We are encouraged that he is responding to treatment in hospital. He remains as much of a fighter now as he was 50 years ago, when incidents such as the raid on this farm took place.
Thursday's events also saw the launch of a medallion to commemorate the former President Nelson Mandela and late ANC leader Albert Luthuli's legacies. Their faces were engraved on medallion coins. Newton Debo, CCTV.
Now time for a short break, still ahead. Not taking any chances, Uganda to screen refugees entering its territory. And UN Security Council concerned over the security situation in South Sudan.
We follow the latest trends in global politics, economics, culture and sport, and how Africa fits into the global picture. You decide what's important.
We need a trade passport.
Africa's future will be determined by Africa.
For women's equal opportunity, for a better life.
We have to change something, and it's not the outsiders.
Talk Africa, a new voice for the world.
Welcome back into the Horn of Africa region now, where there are reports of yet another brazen attack. 2 civilians are confirmed dead, while 4 others were injured after a suicide bomber rammed his explosives-packed vehicle at a passing convoy of the African Union Peacekeeping Force. This happened just opposite the UNDP offices in Mogadishu that also came under attack in June. The AMISOM convoy was passing along the boulevard that leads to the airport en route to their fortified headquarters. However, no casualty has been reported by the AMISOM force. A BBC Somali service journalist passing by was also caught in the blast and sustained minor injuries.
We had a loud blast and rushed over here, and then I was told 3 boys might still be at the tea room that caught fire. We are all confused. We cannot tell the casualty or damage caused now.
The Ugandan army has started screening all refugees who entered its territory on Wednesday following clashes between Ugandan rebel forces and government troops in eastern Congo. Ugandan army spokesman Paddy Nkunda told journalists in Kampala they want to be sure the ADF rebels do not infiltrate its borders. The Ugandan Red Cross says it has registered over 18,000 Congolese refugees. CCTV's Isabel Nigeria has more details. About 3,000 Congo refugees now camped in Uganda's western district of Bundibujo and Kasese will have to identify themselves to security at the border. Uganda's army spokesperson says the ADF could take advantage of this influx to enter the country and destabilize it.
We screen out the wrong characters because it's possible that during this period the ADF might want to use the opportunity to move their sleeper cells into the country.
The ADF is a rebel group which has established its base in the DRC and is opposed to the Kampala administration. The group has recently threatened fresh attacks on Uganda, and the army says intelligence suggests they are planning bomb attacks. He says Uganda will have to get permission from President Kabila's government in Kinshasa to pursue the rebels on the DRC territory.
You can be sure that we will not act unilaterally on this as a country, as a force. We will engage with the DRC if there will be need for us to act on ADF and get appropriate permission.
Ankunda also says the ADF is suspected of having links to terror group Al-Shabaab, and its rebels are currently undergoing training on how to use improvised explosive devices, according to intelligence. Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Kampala.
The UN Security Council has urged peacekeepers in South Sudan to quickly move more troops and equipment to volatile areas like the eastern state of Jonglei to better protect civilians. The Security Council said this as it renewed the UN mission in that country for another year. Fighting between South Sudanese troops and armed groups in Jonglei has forced tens of thousands of people to flee their homes in the African nation, while gunmen in April ambushed and killed 5 UN peacekeepers and 7 civilian staff. The United States issued a rare criticism of South Sudan on Wednesday, saying it was disappointed the army had failed to protect civilians in vulnerable areas in Jonglei. South Sudan's UN ambassador Francis Mading Deng told the council his country was determined to work on its problems.
At present, we recognize that there is a gap between our aspirations for security and respect for human rights, which can be attributed to the negative legacy of a long and devastating conflict that has left our people traumatized, militarized, and heavily armed. We are determined to address these with the help of our friends and international partners. The government remains especially concerned by the situation in Jonglei, which presents a challenge to our ability to discharge our primary responsibility for the protection of our civilians.
All right, to Southern Africa, and Zimbabwe is appealing to its neighbors to help fund elections due in 3 weeks. The vote carries a price tag of more than $130 million, but so far, Zimbabwe has raised less than 1/3 of that amount. CCTV's Farim Wakutuya filed this report.
Millions of Zimbabweans are due to go to the polls on the 31st of July. The election could spell another term for President Robert Mugabe or end his lengthy tenure. But paying for the election is proving a headache. Finance Minister Tendai Biti says so far he has raised $30 million for voter registration and $11 million for materials. He says the situation is grim.
We are far away from meeting the target. We don't have the money. And we can't borrow. The market was crowded out by the $40 million that we borrowed for the referendum.
The United Nations had offered to help, but Zimbabwe turned it down, saying the offer came with unacceptable conditions. It's also scrapped plans to increase taxes, fearing this would drive an already overburdened economy over the edge. BT is now hoping the Southern African development community can come to the rescue. Zimbabwe is speaking to 4 countries in the region to help out. The minister was not at liberty to divulge which nations he is talking to, but says the indications have been promising. With time fast running out, those promises need to materialize into hard cash very soon. The minister has long bemoaned the lack of revenues from Zimbabwe's diamond industry. He says that money would solve the problem.
Diamond exports by the end of June exceeded $300 million. Half of that belongs to us because we're a 50% shareholder. That's $150 million. That's more than what we need given what we've already paid for. Zimbabwe has previously approached South Africa for $100 million. It is not yet clear whether South Africa will help. Farai Mwakutuya, CCTV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Let's take another quick break. When we come back. On this sport, Saudi royal charged in the US for allegedly enslaving a Kenyan woman. Welcome back. A Saudi princess charged with bringing a Kenyan woman to the United States and forcing her to work as a domestic servant could face more charges in the case. This is according to a California prosecutor. Michelle Alaban was arrested on human trafficking charges at her apartment in suburban Albion early on Wednesday. It came after authorities said the alleged victim escaped from the residence and flagged down a bus driver. The 42-year-old princess is charged with bringing the Kenyan woman to the United States in May, confiscating her passport and paying her only a fraction of what she was promised. The victim was also subjected to work for long hours and held captive in the princess's apartment.
It's been 150 years since the Emancipation Proclamation, and so slavery has been unlawful in the United States and certainly in California all this time, and it's disappointing to see it in use here, and I think it may not be limited to this particular case, but this is certainly an example of forced labor, coerced labor.
According to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, many Africans are finding themselves in poor migration conditions due to various economic situations prevailing in many countries. CCTV sought views from Mutuma Rutere, who is a special rapporteur in the High Commissioner's office.
Particularly with the current economic crisis and financial crisis in the world, I have noted that there is an increasing demonization and scapegoating of migrants as the cause of economic and financial crisis in these countries. We are experiencing economic crisis in certain regions of the world, and therefore the pressures within those countries, mixed also with increasing sentiments and ideas and attitudes of racism, have compounded the problems that migrants face in these destination countries. It's very important that within African countries, the countries that are producing migrants themselves, that states come up with mechanisms of tracking what happens to their citizens when they move to other destinations, to other countries as migrants. Part of the problem is that there is no proper tracking in different countries. Countries often don't know what is happening to their citizens. Also, you have a mechanism or mechanisms through which any migrants who may be at risk can seek redress from either their mission or within the destination countries, but also from other agencies.
Germany-Africa ties in post-coup Egypt won the agenda of a meeting in the German capital on Thursday between the African Union's chairperson Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and Chancellor Angela Merkel. In her press briefing, the influential South African politician, who has been at the helm of the African Union Commission for a year, said she would like to see more participation from German companies in Africa. Dlamini-Zuma and Merkel also discussed the political upheaval now engulfing Egypt. Egypt is currently suspended from the African Union, but Dlamini insisted the North African country could return as soon as it has an elected leadership.
We would like to see much more participation of German companies in Africa, because Africa is a continent with lots more opportunities going into the future. It's a continent that is going to grow much more with a much more bigger, younger, vibrant population. It is in our rules that if there is an undemocratic or unconstitutional change of government, the country gets suspended. So it's nothing against Egypt, it's just an existing rule of the AU. But the same rule says we have to engage with the country until it comes back to constitutionality.